This is the Heroic Voice, where I talk to comic book creators, people I've worked with, other interesting people, about the history of comics, superheroes, and the current state of the comic book industry. I also discuss current and upcoming projects, current events, and any other topics my guests might be interested in talking about. So subscribe and hit the like button. Help me grow this channel and promote indie comic book creators, publishers, and other people affiliated with the comic book industry. Your comments are appreciated. Get to it and leave feedback, good, bad, and otherwise. I am your host, Dennis Maloney, writer, publisher of the Heroic Multiverse, where we spotlight good girls, bad girls, super babes, and superheroics in a classic, kind of golden agey style. Grab some snacks and enjoy. This is the Heroic Voice. Welcome to the Heroic Voice. I'm here with R.J. Carter of Critical Blast. He's going to be doing some Southern Nights collections here, and he
Yes.
has a really cool company. R.J., if you would, talk about your company.
Well, I am RJ Carter. I'm the senior managing editor at criticalblast.com. We started off as just a review blog. It was all we were doing. I had been working as a reviewer for another website for about 15 years, and the guy decided to close it down. I decided I wasn't done yet because I liked what I was doing. So I just, started up a new website, and it paralleled some other side projects I was doing. I was working as an author for different companies. I had some books published through Telos in the UK, and I did a few Remo Williams books for the Destroyer folk over at Warren Murphy Media. And then at some point, I was like, boy, the publishing thing they're doing sure looks a whole lot easier than the writing thing that I'm doing. Uh, and in some way
Oh,
it is, but they didn't tell me how much more expensive it was. So So we had some people who about 5 years ago were like, hey, I'm really looking at trying to write a novel, and they were writing reviews for us. I was like, well, yeah, we're thinking about doing this, and would you want to take a shot with us? So we did that. We had our first novel published. It wasn't a graphic novel, but it was comic book related. We did this thing called Bulletproof from S.J. Mitchell. We did
oh,
hardcover and softcover, and that's it's still out there. It's always going to be out there as long as we're a company. Um, So we did that, and I was like, well, I really want to get into, anthologies. I really liked short stories. Plus, it was like, and I don't have to write everything in them. I can get other people, and I pay them. So we did our first anthology, which was Gods and Services, which was a bunch of little short stories about, this pop-up store that sells cursed items. It has a god attached to anything you buy, and that god says, "Oh, you've paid me money now. I have to make your life better." And it was subjective to the whims of the god. So we had, comedy, we had horror, we had all kinds of things in it. We moved on from there and did a sequence of short stories called The Devil You Know, which was 20 stories of people encountering you know who. And I did that because I was like, I had a short story that would fit there. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get this short story placed anywhere as long as I'm busy doing everything else. So I might as well just put it in my own book. And it took 3 volumes of The Devil You Know before I finally got my short story finished and in place and acted like a writer again. So we did The Devil You Know, The Devil You Know Better, and The Devil You Know Best. So that was our first 4 years or 5 year history. At which point, before this point, I'd already become friends with George Peter Gatsis out of Canada, and we'd been talking about different projects, his projects. We already entered the fulfillment business at this point, where we're doing critical blast logistics, taking people's crowdfunders and just fulfilling it for them so they didn't have to. They, spend all their time creating that way. And plus, saving money for people who were international. So they didn't have to pay the huge international fees that were being charged during COVID. We got around it just by bulk shipping.
yeah.
And George and I just started talking about doing books. And he's like, well, you got the publishing thing going. Why don't you pull some stuff from like public domain, and then I'll do the illustrations for it, and we'll shove it together. I don't have it on hand. It's in the other room, but we did a 540 page, 8.5 by 8.5 hardcover of the Brothers Grimm, the complete illustrated Brothers Grimm. And that was a labor of love. But it taught us a lot as far as, formatting books, getting color values right, setting schedules. and and we went on with a lot of George's input and ideas. We did more anthologies. We did something called The Monsters Next Door. Uh, I like the title to be exactly what you expect the theme to be. Like, hey, house next door, something weird about it. Oh, the monsters live there. Okay. Um, and it was George's idea to say, why don't we do something that's never been done before? And what we did was we if you've seen any anthology at all, you know how they are. You thumb to a story, there's the title, there's the author's byline, third of the page down, you start your story and you just go. We gave everybody a comic book cover. So the story began with like a full page illustration, their title made into a logo, their byline down here at it, and a scene from the story. We didn't tell anybody we were doing this. So when we had the book launch, we started going through it. Everybody was just like, "That's my story. That's a scene from my book." So it went over so well that we continued with the Fables Next Door. Uh, Again, exactly what it sounds like. Since it's Cinderella or it's Sleeping Beauty or it's some fable you've never heard of, because there's a lot of them. And this time, George says, let's do it in color this time.
Hmm.
In retrospect, that might have been a mistake because it turns out that you got 20 color pages in a 350 page book, you're printing 350 color pages. So there's no off and on switch for that. It got a little pricey. If you like color books, get that one. We're not going to do that again. um, but that's the I hate to say it this way, but those are the books. Those were not the comic books.
Uh-huh.
But because I had been shipping so many comic books for people doing crowdfunders, we said, why don't we get some synergy between the two companies, the publishing company and the distribution company, and reach out to some of these people for whom I distributed and say, hey, you're on issue 5 of your series. You're doing really well. What are you doing with books 1 through 4? Well, we keep a big stock of them here in case people want to back order them on the next crowdfunder, but they're taking up space. And I was like, would you like to do them in a trade paperback? Oh, I don't have room for trade paperbacks. Well, what if you had zero inventory? Well, then how would you fulfill them or what? I'm like, well, why don't we let Walmart fulfill it? Why don't we let Amazon fulfill it? And it took a while for this to congeal in people's brains that this was an option for them. But we finally, made some headway with Dave Brink, the guy behind Genuine Comics in the Netherlands, and he had done Perfect 10. So he's on issue 5 of Perfect 10 right now, but he wanted to do an artist edition of the first book. So we got all the print files. It was beautiful. He had all the script pages. He had all the breakdowns, the inks. So we did basically the IDW version of an artist edition where we just had, hey, here's a page with here's the script, here's the author and the artist talking back and forth to each other about this specific page, breakdowns, full inks with no letters, and then or rather blue lines with the letters, and then on the opposite page, just the full bleed, black and white only, printer marks down the side of the page of that specific page. And then we included the color pages at the end, so they really got the full book with letters. They could read it, as well as pinups and everything else. It was and it went over well, and we were able to start looking at other crowdfunders and saying bring it over. Some of them are bringing their new material over, and we're printing it for their crowdfunder because we can do floppies now. We do floppies like these are actually not them. Just grab the first one. Okay, 2100 Samurai. This is Nick Gibson's book.
Oh,
It's a
that's cool.
floppy.
Uh-huh.
It's perfect bound. We don't do staples. We don't do gloss, but we did do black and white books. We do color books. I know I had some other ones here. They're hiding on me.
That's
We've also done,
quite an eclectic
yeah,
set of material.
it's we don't tie ourselves down to a
Yeah.
genre or form. We've done these, these manga books that are coming um, from the Netherlands here. This is Anna Folkenstahl does these. So, she's got, and again, it's like a couple of color pages in the front, and then the rest of
And
it's
the
black
rest in
and
black
white.
and white.
But that's the manga style.
Yeah.
Um, we're doing true crime. One of the things that we do differently is we release all the formats at once. So, for instance, we have the 2100 Samurai in a hardcover as well as a soft cover, as well as a digest size.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And we find that they everything sells in all forms. So we're if you can't afford the hardcover, well, you'll pick up the soft cover. You don't have to wait a 6 months to a year for a soft cover version to come out. We just drop them all at once.
Yeah. So what's up next on your agenda? As if I didn't know.
Well, it depends on the day. To be honest with you, I've got about four different books that I'm ping-ponging back and forth between here. But I say I am. Um, we have we, we quit. Well, we didn't quit talking to crowdfunders, but we expanded our thinking beyond crowdfunders, and we said, you know what? There's other people who have comic properties that have just kind of laid fallow for a while. And one of those folks was somebody I've been talking to for a couple of years now, Henry Vogel.
Hmm.
And Henry had a property called Southern Nights, and it was tied up with a license with somebody. So I was like, well, it was a good shot. And Henry's like, but I still own the rights to X Thieves. So we're like, yeah, we'd love to do X Thieves. Fred and Bianca was a hilarious pair, and I remember reading these in the '80s and just loving it all the way through. So we got all of those, and we put them in this uh, hardcover volume, and
All
of course, like
14
I said,
issues.
all 14, well, 13 issues.
13.
The reason there was something about the 14th issue. Can't recall what it was. I'm sure it was a rights issue. Somebody appeared in it that we couldn't do. Uh,
Ah,
but uh, but again, because we do all formats, we've got this soft cover version here, and we've got this digest. This is the one you take on the plane. This is the one you display on the coffee table. Full size, 8.5 by 11. Henry liked it, so Henry worked it around. I don't know how, what had to be done, but he came back and says, "Okay, you guys are doing Southern Nights." Um, and we're almost done with Southern Nights. We put it on hold because, and folks, if you're Southern Nights fans, you're going to want to know this. We Jennifer Kraft found lots of original artwork. Just a treasure trove of it, and it's currently in the mail, being held hostage somewhere by U.S. postal carriers. And we're waiting on it to arrive so that we can scan it and get it into this volume. But the volume as it stands right now is 1,100 pages. So take this and basically it's going to be this thick uh, as a standalone hardcover volume.
all
It's going to be
34, all 34 regular issues of that.
all 34. In fact, we call it the almost complete
Hmm.
um, Southern Nights, and you know why we're calling it that.
Yes.
Because guess what? Again, there was a rights issue, but this time it was one we could work around. Because you had the last two issues of Southern Nights crossing over with Morrigan
The,
Wars.
the League of Champions. Yes.
Yes. So tell us about that because I don't remember that.
Well, that was pretty straightforward. I'd met Henry and Dave Kraft in Atlanta at one of the fantasy fairs, gosh, in the mid 80s. And we got to talking. We talked about a lot of things that aren't really relevant to this. And at some point in the conversation, and I don't remember who suggested the idea, it was suggested that we should have a team up between the champions and the Southern Knights. Um, Henry and I approached it independently, put some ideas together of how the characters might interact with each other. There were some obvious and some not so obvious riffs. Um, for example, right, Flair was convinced that Dragon was a handsome guy who changed into a dragon rather than the other way around, right? And Dragon could never convince her through the whole story that he was in fact a dragon who could turn into
Yes.
a guy, right? Icicle was convinced that since every dragon has a horde somewhere, Dragon must have a horde somewhere, and she would try to pry out the location from him so that she could go steal it. Right? Didn't have any luck doing that because Dragon does not, in fact, have a horde, even though he could never convince Icicle that he doesn't. Right?
Not
Uh,
easy being dragon.
yeah, no, it's not. And we did a few other riffs. We decided that the best character to use as the villain of the piece, given that Henry had established the existence of a time machine in his world, would be Morrigan, looking to grab the time machine and take it back to a time when gods were actually worshipped and see what she could do about changing reality so that gods would be worshipped. Because that's her whole thing. She didn't want to be a retired god. She wanted to be an active god.
Didn't want to end up in the gods and services store.
Yeah. So anyway, given the time travel thing, we decided that we would split the groups of champions and Southern Knights up into three teams, send them off into the past, the present, an alternate present, and the future. And we divided the teams. Rose was the odd person out because we had 10 people, right? Three groups of three, and somebody who had managed to snag the time machine from Morgan and go around collecting all the people from their various escapades in the past. So we had introductory sequences where the champions fans would be introduced to the Southern Knights fans would be introduced to the champions. They would get together, there would be a big fight with Morgan and the Thug Master, who is one of Flair's enemies, with one of the villains, Darkon, one of the Southern Knights villains, Dread, and everything would go to heck in a handbasket. They'd be all go off into different times. And then over the course of three different sequences, we would have Rose gather them all up after they dealt with whatever problems they were facing. And then a big grand finale, right? Everybody and his cousin in one great big issue with a final resolution. And I think it turned out pretty well. Um, I had several different artists working on it with Mark Probst, tying it all together at the end. We got George Perez to do the artwork on a few of the first chapters. He did a couple of covers as well, but George had so many other commitments that he, just wasn't able to carry it all the way through to the end.
I was super excited when I saw that. By the way, I was like, "Oh my God, we're publishing George Perez now!" Because I was a huge Perez fan with his Justice League work, and of course, New Teen Titans. I was in high school when that came out, uh, which is
It,
they were plastered on my wall. I was taping comic books to the wall in the bag, mind you.
yeah, and George told me at the time that one of his ambitions was to, draw every existing comic book character. So we gave him a chance at drawing some of the existing comic book characters that he had not been able to draw. And he loved it. This was just he just couldn't continue with it. So, I got a few other artists to step in and then got Marks to finish off with the covers and the denouement. So I think it's a good story. I liked doing it. Henry seemed to like it. We plotted the thing together basically, even though I ended up doing most of the scripting. So, and we did it originally in black and white, but when we started up again in the 90s, we put color into it. So what you're going to be seeing is the color edition. There's going to be one cover that will be your branding, Critical Blast, or whatever branding Henry wants, and another version that will be Heroic Publishing branding, and it will be a double page spread, right? So you'll have to get both volumes to see the entire double page
You got to
spread.
get both volumes, see the entire thing. We're going to make the interiors a little different on our side, just to drive traffic back and forth. That's I argue with my creative guy a lot. Sometimes he wins, sometimes I win. We'll talk about it after this offline because that's the behind the scenes baseball stuff. But yeah, it's we want each one to be unique, other than just the covers. We want them to match up. We got to talk sizes too. We want to make sure
Oh
that you
yeah.
don't print a 8 by 10 and we do an 8.5 by 11. It's like, hey, it's not line up. We'll get all that right. But yeah, so it essentially we will be getting the entire Southern Nights because we'll do the great big collection. We're also going to offer that great big collection in a volume in a set of 5 volumes, smaller volumes, and it's going to be a puzzle spine, so it'll spell out the Southern Nights logo when you put all 5 volumes together, which will include Dragon, by the way, the Dragon
Ah,
miniseries,
the 4 issues.
and then outside of that, we're going to offer a book that's just the Dragon miniseries in case you've got all your Southern Nights but you missed Dragon. So Dragon standalone, and then the Morrigan Wars standalone. So our spine will fit in with that puzzle spine. It won't be part of the puzzle, but it'll be like a white border thing. It'll match. It's going to match it. And then of course, like you said, the cover is going to be a dual cover with Heroic Publishing's imprint version, so you can put them both together and get the big spread picture. We should probably put a poster out of that at some point too.
Yeah, we should. Um, the artist for that, Henry Martinez, says he'll have his roughs for me tomorrow morning. Today is, by the way, the 26th of October. So if you're viewing this, we'll already have that rough. And this will be maybe a week or so after this that actually goes live on YouTube. So, we'll have a few days between now and then. So what else was I going to say? Oh, from our point of view, this volume is a continuation of the League of Champions trade paperback series, right? So that's our context for this. We are gradually collecting all of the old League of Champions stories together in various volumes. This will be some either 5 or 6. I'm not sure which volume it is, but we'll have some extras in there as well, although I'm not sure at this point what those extras will be. I do know that Mark Probst was working on, a revision of the Southern Nights, bringing them up to date. I still have some of that artwork. Maybe we could include that in our volume.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I said, make each one special and draw people to both of them. That's
yeah,
that's how
and it's a
Mark.
shame that Mark, was not able to continue with that because I liked where he was going.
I really love
Henry
his work too.
Henry did take that story that he'd written for Mark and he did print it in a prose version. We'll have to get some information on that, and
Yeah,
people probably interested in seeing that.
there's a Kickstarter out right now, and the name of it is evading me at the moment, but it's basically uh, prose stories of all the indie comics characters: John Sable Freelance, Badger, and they just hit their uh, their stretch goal amount of $7,000 funded, and that was the tier at which point they wanted to include a Southern Nights prose story. So that's
Ah,
now it's going to be included in
that
that
is
volume.
likely the very story that Henry had intended for the revival of the Knights. So, yeah, it was a good story. I remember it. I still have that. So, but not in the detail that Henry certainly included in his prose version of it. All I have is the rough draft of the plot. So,
We're
yeah,
we're um we're having a blast doing this. I mean, yeah, that's our that's our slogan. Having a blast.
yep.
Um, but like I said, we're bouncing around between all kinds of projects right now. While we're backburnering Southern Nights, and by the way, this is how quickly this worked out. We talked on a Sunday. They sent us the files on a Monday. George had a prototype book done on a Tuesday, because George's whole outlook to this is like when they say, hey, how long do you think it's going to take? It's a lot of material. George's like, for us, that's a Tuesday. And they finished me, and we got the files. I'm like, George, you realize it is Tuesday now. He's like, dang it, now I've got to live up to my word. And he did. He
Hey, good
spent
for
the
him.
entire Tuesday not scanning, but he's got magic software, and it just cleans up all the pages and makes them look good and formats them to the size, and they're crisp and clean and look brand new. And he did page numbering. They like, guys, here's the prototype book, and they were just jaw slack agape that it was put together that quickly. It wasn't final, of course. We got to get a
Yeah.
forward. We wanted to get the page numbering. We had to shift some things around, like the backup stories. Hey, let's assemble them differently, put them in a different order, that kind
Have
of
you
thing.
done the same with the Morrigan Wars yet, or are you still waiting on that?
I have not done the same with the Morgan Wars yet.
But you do have the
I don't know
files.
what George may have. He's
Uh-huh.
he's he's going through the pages. He's doing something with them. I know, but because we're going to release the big book, all five books, the Dragon and the Morgan Wars, all at the same time, and we'll coordinate with you, of course, so that our Morgan Wars both come out at the same time. We don't want to jump the gun on you.
That's okay. I don't mind if you jump the gun. It's
Well,
cool. Uh,
we're going to get it out, but we've got so many other projects. We're
oh yeah.
currently scanning pages. Um, Actually, all the pages are scanned now. We're going to be doing an omnibus of William Messner Loeb's journey.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're very, very happy about that.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find out through his agent what unpublished stuff is out there, because he did a sequel to it called War Drums, which was supposed to be 6 issues, and only two of them were published. We're really hoping, fingers crossed, that we can either find the script or the unfinished pages for the other 4 issues and have them published for the first time anywhere. But anyway, we're going to try to finish that story up, even if Bill just dictates. I know he's not in the best health. If he just dictates it audio version and we transcribe it, we'll do something.
All right. That takes us pretty well up to date. What we've not talked about is you. In the
Wow.
brief time we have left, how did you get into comics? What was your impetus for that?
Okay. So we got to go way, way back to the David Copperfield level of introductions. Um, I grew up in Tilden, Illinois. Now, Tilden was a town of 900, and it's shrunk since then. And if you lived in Tilden, you did everything in Sparta, Illinois, which was the town next over.
Ah,
And you're
that's where the
nodding
printing
because you
press
know what's in
was.
Sparta. That's where
Yeah.
the printing press was. And if you knew somebody who worked at Spartan Printing, World Color Press, uh, they brought home print overruns like day old donuts at the end of the day. Comics were everywhere. And the funny thing is like nobody I really knew was into them. So it was all me. And I learned how to read off of these comic books. I was, my barber had them. Like I said, I'm 4 years old. I knew how to read by the time I was in kindergarten, and nobody knew it. And I didn't tell anybody because I thought everybody could. And I've told this story on our channel before where I'm in first grade at some point. Yeah, I did. I made it through first grade. And the teacher's doing what the teacher does. She's got the big whiteboard up there with the big pictures and the big words, and she's reading real slow.
Yeah. I
And
know
I'm
the
like,
story. And
yeah,
I have the same story. I was reading when I was two.
there you go.
My mom read to me, and it didn't take me very long to figure out that those funny little squiggles at the bottom of the page were telling her what to say. Right. So I was reading, I was doing math, I was doing all that stuff long before I went to school. So,
Exactly. But she's reading this card, and I'm like, all right, I've already read it. So I'm doing what a 6-year-old kid does, which is like play with the bug that's crawling across the floor or untie your shoes and make a knot. And I look up and she's in my face. And she's like, would you like to read to the class? Now I'm 6. I don't get sarcasm yet. So my initial response, not out loud, was, oh God, yes, can I please? So I looked up at the card she had up there, and I remember it was plants create energy through a process called photosynthesis, in which they absorb sunlight through their cells and create chlorophyll. Second grade reading class instantly.
mhm.
And I was like, well, duh. I mean, I learned all this when the Flash had to fight the Floronic Man, and he basically blotted out the sun so the guy couldn't get any sunlight. Poison Ivy does this to Batman all the time. They were Flash facts, and it was science and reading and stuff that I got from comic
Comic
books.
books. Yeah, I was reading, my teachers had me go read when I was in second grade to the fifth and sixth grade classes. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but I think the point of it was to show them that yes, it was possible to read. Right?
Yes.
So, because it was the low achieving fifth and sixth grade classes that they had me read to. I remember that. So, trying to shame them, I guess.
I suppose. But first grade was also when I started writing.
Mhm.
I wrote my first play in first grade. Apparently, my mother says she still has something I wrote in first grade or kindergarten called The Revenge of the Kitchen Broom.
Hmm.
I haven't seen it in years, but I wrote a play in first grade, real short thing, and we had a pep rally, and the eighth grade basketball team acted it out because it was a basketball play. Um, I remember in eighth grade, I was writing. Our principal, who was our eighth grade teacher, said every Friday I want you to turn in a composition. I don't care what it's about, but every Friday turn something in. So that's when the whole class would basically go pull something off the encyclopedia, open up to a page, and start transcribing. And I'm like, it can be about anything. He's like, anything. So I started turning in weekly chapters of a story set in World War II of a vampire who was discovered after a bomb blast unearthed his coffin. And he wanted to, basically make up for past wrongs. So he joins the U.S. Army. And I was just chapter after chapter of this ongoing adventure. And he was sending me down to the sixth grade to read from this story to them, saying, "Look what the guy's writing." Um, it wasn't until 2000 that I was actually published officially by somebody, despite all the self work I was doing and the stuff I did in college. As the when I was the editor of the paper, I could just write my own stuff and
Oh,
publish it.
yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
count, but
Being the editor gives you privileges that you should not be
yes,
abusing.
I know, especially if you don't know that you're abusing them.
Well, RJ, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Let me ask you one more question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to a young creative person who might be interested in the graphic story medium?
Depending on what you want to come in as, if you're an artist and you have the talent, draw every day, draw something. Same for the writers. Sit down and put words on the page. They don't have to be good. I liken it to it's like any other exercise. I've joined a gym within the past 2 months, and I was told you do this exercise, do this exercise, do this one. I'm like, you're putting 5 pounds on those weights. I'm a fully grown man, and she's like, okay, do what I told you, and it hurts. 5 pounds hurts. Like, what the heck is going on here? I can't lift this thing after 30 times. But after a week, I'm doing it. After 2 weeks, I'm doing 10 pounds. You just keep doing it every day, and you exercise that writing muscle and that art muscle until you keep getting better. You're not going to get better if you don't go through all the stuff that's junk.
That's right. That is absolutely true. I, to this day, I write every day. And then I go back and look at it, and that doesn't quite work. Let's see what we can do about that. You can do that now with word processing. You couldn't do that
Yeah.
easily with a typewriter.
Oh, it
Um,
was a lot harder.
yeah, it was a
You had
lot
to
harder. You could
start
do
from
it, but you
scratch.
have to basically retype the entire page. So now you can
Yes.
just make simple corrections. I've
It's a lot
mentioned
easier
this.
to edit than it is to write from blank page, but you put
Yeah,
1,000 words out per day. Doesn't matter if you take an hour to do it, a half hour to do it, or 5 hours to do it. 1,000 words a day should be your goal. Button
at
share
least.
and get them done.
And if you get into that zone, which happens sometimes, you can find yourself writing till 3 or 4 in the morning.
I've had a few things that happened like that to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all righty. Social media, you mentioned your web page, criticalblast.com. Is there any place on social media where people can follow you?
All of the social medias that exist, we have obtained a presence on them. We're Critical Blast on all of them. So if you're looking for us on Instagram or Facebook or X, uh, there we are.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We should do this again sometime. I
We
will want to
should.
talk to you about other projects down the road. I'm sure we'll find a time to be able to do that. And I want to encourage everybody to like this channel, subscribe to it, and for heaven's sake, share it. Share it with people. We need to build our base. We're getting a lot of interesting interviews. This one was great. I love this one. Thank you so much, RJ.
Well, thank you for
Uh,
having me.
and any last word?
Uh, buy more independent comics, especially ours.
Thank you very much. Signing off.